Everyone, welcome to another edition of CEO Wisdom Podcast. Today we have Benny Rubin with us. He is CEO at Senders. I've been talking with Benny since a couple of weeks ago. Very interesting guy. He's in Brooklyn, New York, has started various companies so far, been an entrepreneur for a while, and he knows his shit. Benny, introduce yourself. Tell us a bit more about Senders and your background.
Sure. Senders is a high volume cold email outbound agency. We specialize in the infrastructure required to help companies scale up their cold email. Most of our clients send between 15 and 45,000 or more emails per month. And in the last 12 months, we sent around 20 million cold emails on behalf of our clients. The company currently is 20 employees. And we serve around 65 clients at the current moment.
Impressive. You started your career as a bass player. So you started in music. Tell us about that.
That's right. Yeah. So my background is in music. I went to the Berklee College of Music in Boston, and I studied electric bass, and I play violin and viola and guitar. And music was basically my entire life from maybe 7 years old to 21 or so. And
why that, like, what happened with that career? Why not continue in music? And is that still a passion for you?
Music is still definitely a passion. When I was 19, I got super interested in Japan.
Yeah.
And I got really interested in the Japanese language, and I went and did a summer study abroad in Japan. And my interest in Japan and Japanese is actually what fractured my pursuit of music. But suddenly I found something that was even more intoxicating, at least at the time. I was like, oh, wow, this country is amazing. Like, there's so much going on here. And it's so different from what I'm used to in the States. So I basically moved there to Japan when I was 21.
Okay.
And 22, I can't remember exactly when it was, around 22. And I graduated music school a year early because I was a little bit restless.
Okay.
And all my friends had graduated a year later, and they all moved to LA and New York and other places to pursue music. So after a year in Japan of studying Japanese, I did a year program at a language program in Japan. A friend of mine became the musical director for a Sony artist in LA, an up and coming Sony artist. And he said, hey, why don't you come play bass for this band? And because I was just like young and dumb and didn't really have that much going on, I was just like, all right. So I flew to LA, auditioned, got the job, and then we set out on tour. And while I was on tour, I realized, oh, I actually don't really want to do this. It's fun for a lot of people. And a lot of my friends still pursue it and do amazing things touring all over the world. But for me, I was like, I'm kind of restless. Like, this doesn't make sense. And I'd already been thinking a lot about entrepreneurship because when I lived in New York, in the time transitioning from music school to Tokyo, I lived in New York. I interned at a recording studio, and the owners of the studio, they make music for TV commercials mainly. And the owners of that were like kind of late 20s, early 30s guys. And I saw for the first time how business works at that level, the micro entrepreneurship level, where you're a couple of dudes and you have some overhead, but you also successfully manage to get money to flow from, in that case, the largest brands in the world. They were doing commercials for Apple and all these huge folks, down to this couple of like dudes in their 20s. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. This process makes sense. So eventually, after I quit touring, which was very short-lived because I didn't like it very much, even though everyone was super nice and it was a good experience overall, I moved back to Japan. I already had my sights set on starting a company. And while on tour, this is, you guys, you're going to know how old I am. I say this, but I'm 38, by the way. So I was born in 1985. While I was on tour, that's literally the moment when social media became important.
Really?
Yeah, it was 2008, financial crisis. Twitter all of a sudden became a thing. And the direct relationship between an artist and their fans is what started to make the difference. Every era before that, everything was intermediated by management, publishing companies, and all these other layers. And for the first time, people like Katy Perry were posting on MySpace and posting out and sort of interacting with fans directly as she was becoming famous. And obviously, we know Justin Bieber became famous from YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. So in that moment, I said, oh my God, this is so interesting. I should start a company that helps Western artists communicate directly with their Japanese fans. So it took me some time, probably a year of like trying to figure out what. But then eventually I got into meetings with Universal and Sony and Warner and all the major labels in Japan. And I made deals with them and I put together a team of writers. And we started and ran these Twitter accounts for Justin Bieber, Taylor Swift, Lady Gaga, Beyonce, all these artists. And a lot of these accounts that are run by these labels, they still exist to this day. But around 3 or 4 years into doing that, we transitioned to doing it for brands as well. And then we eventually sold that whole company to one of our partners. And that took me to maybe, I don't know what year that was, 2015 or so. Then I started a software company really early in that wave of influencer marketing, which is basically the first wave of what we call influencer marketing now. And we were trying to do software to manage influencers, sort of similar to what Grin ended up doing, which is now a giant company and is totally crushing it. We were not the right people to do it. And we raised some money, did an awesome accelerator, made a bunch of friends in the entrepreneurial community in San Francisco where I moved to do that. And then we basically shut it down. I moved to New York. And how I ended up doing cold email was very simple. In 2015, 2016, when I looked around at all my entrepreneur friends, and I asked them like, hey, what do you guys need help with? They're all like, well, cold email like kind of sucks. Like you're pretty good at it. Why don't you do it for us? So that's when I started doing cold email professionally for companies. And then around 2020, with this, a bunch of twists in the road, et cetera, around 2020 was when I decided that there had to be a better way to do it. And that's when I started to take it very, very seriously. And then from 2020, we became what became Senders, and we grew it to where it is today.
Got a bunch of follow-up questions.
Sure,
First
that was a
is,
long story. You guys got my whole
but it's a
story.
good one. It's eclectic, just like I like them. We also share a love for Asia. I was an exchange student in Hong Kong and fell in love with it, and changed my life. I was like trail running back in these days in the mountains, going meditating in Buddhist centers, and I understood I could work from a distance. Most importantly, make cash from my laptop. That changed my life. But I have a huge passion for music. Would like to start a company, probably helping artists or an AI music generating software. Although there's a couple of good ones out there. How do you promote an artist? Like, I guess first you need a good product, good talent, and that question fascinated me studying Scooter Braun, for example, with Bieber and all of these folks. So like, if you'd have to promote an artist nowadays, how would you do it, and how would you make them go viral?
No idea.
TikTok most probably, or
no idea. I mean, so the problem is that, so if you think like just very basically, because I'm like a music nerd, so we can go back in time. If you go to Spotify and you open up a playlist that's like awesome songs from the 1970s or something, the kind of music you hear and the quality here is unbelievable. It's so awesome. It sounds so good. The players are so amazing. If you contrast that with today, you had a very, very rare few that could get the resources together and get the playing together. And if someone really sucked for whatever reason, there's so many filtering mechanisms that would not let them be spending $1,000 a day in 1970s dollars wasting tape in a recording studio, right?
Yeah.
Because none of those barriers exist now, you went from the rare few that actually could get a record out to, I don't know what, 50 million, 60 million, 100 million people that consider themselves creators.
Hmm.
So in some ways, it's just not unique anymore. So it's a very different kind of game. If you think about what we do for our businesses, I'm a B2B guy. B2B still has a very, very strong local hands-on element. So why do I say that? The companies that we interact with and we try to help, you need this Venn diagram of available, have the skills that can do it, have a price that makes sense for the business, can continue to do it well, so you can't like screw it up quickly because then you'll get fired or whatever. And that intersection is like a very, very few people in the real sense. If you think about what happens when someone says, oh, I want some music right now, is there's just thousands and 100 millions of choices that can sort of fill that need in that exact moment. So
Correct.
I don't think that you can sort of approach it from any logical B2B side of this. And because I never positioned myself, even a decade ago or whatever, when I was doing social media content, I never positioned ourselves as being like, hey, we know how to make artists get successful. We
Hmm.
always said we partner with record labels, B2B, because I'm like essentially a B2B guy. We partner with record labels to help you execute this small piece of your strategy, which I always found to be much more comfortable because I like don't know. I don't know the mechanics of virality. I don't really understand consumer marketing. That's why I don't have like a direct to consumer brand selling whatever, something, yogurt
Yeah.
or water bottles or something.
100%. I think music adds so much value to my life, which is why, I'd like eventually to get in that business. If I would, I'd probably use AI um, to crunch a bunch of catchy songs and make something better, just aggregate. Because, like you said, a lot of people, they play music and they think they can make a business out of it, a career out of it, just like, I'm good at making food, I'll start a restaurant. So
Mm.
I think they don't factor the competition and so forth. But second question I have for you, the Japan market is one that I
Mm.
had trouble getting in. I'm not sure if you have clients from Japan, but the culture is really um not hostile, but like cold towards foreign companies. I've got one person on my podcast that she's kind of an ambassador for startups in Japan so far, and that's been pretty much it. That's been my history with Japan so far. So, do you have tips on how to enter this market and do business there?
Well, what are you trying to do in Japan?
Cold email for tech companies.
So I lived and worked in Japan for almost 8 years. And I started and built my first company and sold it in Japan in that time. And I sold it to a Japanese company. I wouldn't waste a single minute of my time now trying to sell to or convert a single Japanese company to pretty much anything. And it isn't to say, I think that it isn't to say that it can't be done. Obviously, it can be done because I built and sold my first business in Japan. So there's lots of entrepreneurship happening there. Lots of friends who have successful businesses in Japan doing great things. It's awesome for them. But North America, we move fast. We assess things quickly. We test things quickly. We gamble on things quickly. We have a lot of ability to say to someone on our team, look, man, I think this initiative is going to fail. But if you want to run with it, I'll support you. That's a very common thing for us to just say, you know, like even as a CEO or as a leader, you might have someone that says, hey, I have an idea for blah, blah, blah. And you'd be like, it's not a very good idea, dude. Like, I'd be really surprised if that worked. But you know what? If as long as you can try it and not tear the whole company down in the process, like, go for it. What I found is that inside most Japanese organizations, that just really isn't how things go. And when I was younger and I was much more patient, I was happy to ride my bicycle over to Japanese companies' offices and do 2, 3, 4, 5 meetings and do some song and dance and talk through similar things over and over again. It really like spend the time to convert the deal, to get the deal done. And, you can get deals done. I also speak Japanese, so that helps. It was an enjoyable thing. So I built the networks required to do it. I built the resilience to be able to have those conversations. I kind of did the game. But that was the only game I knew in my early 20s. When I moved back to the States and I started to do that in the States, I realized just how quickly it can go and how quickly people can build trust with each other without lots of in-person meetings, et cetera, et cetera. And I just was like, yeah, this suits my personality much better. This like growth and speed mindset just suits me better.
And your Japan obsession was more from an emotional standpoint, fell in love with the culture rather than a business one. Because, for example,
I
in
didn't
Japan,
even have any sense of business.
There's a bunch of cool companies in Japan, Panasonic, Sony, SoftBank, a personal favorite. A lot of people hate SoftBank. I like him. I like Maza-san. So there's this interest, and technology wise, they're really advanced. So there is that interest. There's also less competition there, but I take your advice to heart because they're very cold and complicated to do business with. I think that doesn't help their economy as well.
I don't find them cold and complicated to do business with at all. But
they're slow, right? That's what I mean by cold.
In my view, it's sort of like, okay, so there's the opposite side to, let's say, slowness. Okay. What speed works both ways. Let's just put it like that. Speed in business works both ways. Americans, just paint with a really broad brush, Americans get on the phone with each other. We build rapport in 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
We talk the details of things quickly. We both weigh the risks of doing something together. Within an hour, within a week, you could have a deal going. Someone could be paying you to give something a try.
Yep.
Totally normal, right? That also means that clients churn really quickly.
Yep.
Because they can have the same exact conversation 6 weeks later with someone that does some other kind of marketing. And within 12 weeks, they're like, hey, this was awesome, man. Like, thanks so much. It was really a great thing to try. But I'm going to turn my attention to this other shiny thing that I want to try.
Okay.
And whether it's a direct competitor or whatever, like, you lose it quickly. That's the downside of it. If you're thinking about very, very long-term relationships or just longer-term relationships, my relationships that I had with Japanese companies that we were doing social media content for back in the day they might spend 3 months deciding if it's going well, and then 6 months deciding if they're going to fire us, and give us 5 or 10 chances in the middle to work together to try to further their goals that they're trying to achieve, simply because there was a bigger investment at the beginning.
Okay. And
if you want like a very explicit, example, I would say 98% of the meetings I did when I lived in Japan, first meetings, were 1 hour long, in person. And they started with tea and 15, 20, 25 minutes of small talk, 15, 20 minutes of business talk, and then 15, 20 minutes of just general sort of chit chat, getting to know each other a little bit.
Okay.
Most of the calls I was doing in the US were 15 minutes, which I find to be too short. I think 30 minutes is probably a better amount of time. But people are like, yeah, I'll give you 15 minutes. Like, let's chat. And I realized, like, I don't know how to connect with someone. Even you and I, we got in the call for the first time. We said, hey, you want to do a podcast? And I was like, well, I think we got to do another call, man. Like, I don't know. This is too short for me. So part of my mind still thinks that you need more time to do anything. And part of that is like carried over from my Japan days. But at the same time, it's very inefficient. So what I was going to say is, the one side of the sword is you get to move really quickly in the US. You get to build trust quickly. You get to do things quickly. In Japan, it always took more time, but those relationships tended to last longer with more chances
Got
in
it.
them. So more careful consideration for signing contracts and more careful consideration for ending contracts.
Yeah. And talking about time, we've got 6 minutes left and I still have a bunch of questions. We can
Well,
do
I got
round
more
two.
time. You're the one who's compressed on time.
Yeah, it always, I like it that way, but let's talk about your SaaS. You do the agency model nowadays. You experience the SaaS model. What have been your insights in between each? And isn't SaaS morally superior to agencies?
So I actually think I'm not doing SaaS now at all, right? We're basically a managed services provider. We use out-of-box software for almost everything with our own proprietary processes and IP addresses and things like that mixed in. When you say morally, I'm gonna ignore the morally superior comment because I know you're being silly. I don't have I don't really have the patience for SaaS. The thing about agencies that I like is that it's a human to human thing. And human to human means just straight up, like, let's say you and I were working together and I was consistently moving meetings around. Not that I do that, but let's say you're always moving meetings around. You could say to me like, hey, can we just choose a time that isn't in danger of being moved around? Because that actually is messing on my schedule. And we solve that problem immediately through a conversation. If the equivalent problem is happening in software and consistently clients are upset at something that's going on in your software, you might be like, oh, well, that piece of the product we're planning on fixing next quarter.
Okay.
So, because we have a product roadmap and we have all these other things going on. So you end up with these very, very protracted periods of clear client dissatisfaction that you can't just resolve through normal interactions. So I find it to be actually really nice to not be tied to a product roadmap, to be able to iterate very, very quickly based solely on people, conversations, intuitions. And I also like that you can have a really individualized approach to clients within a margin, where it's like, oh, this client prefers this to be done in this way. And as long as the standard operating procedures can afford that kind of specialty, you can do it. Well, with software generally, that's harder to do unless you're going to say, okay, we're going to deliberately allow this person to customize this one thing. So I don't know. I didn't have the personality for doing SaaS, and that's probably one of the reasons why we failed when we tried to do it all those years ago. I'm not writing it off now. I have a few side things that are kind of SaaS related, but I can't invest emotionally in those things nearly to the extent I can invest emotionally in the agency model.
Got it. I want to finish up with, we got 3 minutes left. We're going to have to book another one because, I must tell
do
you.
as many as you want.
Yeah, you're an interesting person. I don't often speak with eccentric folks, and I would describe you like that way. I'm also very eccentric on my end. How would I describe you? Yeah, calm, composed. You have very high level of confidence, right? And I want to ask you, as an entrepreneur, what do you optimize for in life? Is it happiness? Is it free time? Is it building your startup to, I don't know, 10 million a year? What do you optimize for?
I don't optimize for anything. I think I optimize for calm, even though I'm not a calm person. I'm a pretty intense person in many ways, but I optimize for calm. And I optimize for, I think maybe I try to optimize for having the least amount of exposure to things that can ruin my day.
Example of that?
Did you and I talk about that before?
No, I don't think so.
So I feel like there's people that like a lot of exposure.
Okay.
Meaning they like to have or they need to for whatever reason. They have a team of 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 people. All these things in the business intersect through them. They personally have lots and lots of preferences. So when they see somebody doing something that goes against their preference, they jump in to do it. So they're constantly kind of looking at what their team's doing or looking at what someone's doing and trying to like correct for it.
Micromanage.
Right. It would be like, well, it's not even micromanaging in a certain sense. It would sort of be like if you're the creative director and you never really do a proper style guide and you never hire people that could make whatever images to your standard, you're obviously going to be jumping in all the time. Like, hey, before you publish that, like you should check the fix this, fix that, fix this, fix that. And that to me is exposure. It means that there's like a lot of things that you're exposed to and that you could be walking into a movie. You could be walking into a movie that starts at 7:59 p.m. And if someone sends you a note that says, hey, this is the email newsletter preview, what do you think? You're going to ignore the first 10 minutes of the movie because that email newsletter is going to go out in an hour and you know what I mean? So when I say optimizing for calm, I want none of those things in my life and none of those things in my business.
Okay.
All those things have to happen and people can be in charge of those things, but it just doesn't have to be done by me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So every time I feel a sense of urgent panic or urgency about anything that feels like there's a ticking clock that I have to jump on, it's a problem. And I immediately say, okay, that's not good. How can I solve that? It's a pretty, it's an old concept. It's not like I invented it or something, but
yeah, correct.
I just think of that as exposure.
There's two main sources to this, and one is mental and one is practical. So like trying to fix the source of the problem, the system itself. I like also working on the mental side of things, and stop associating stress with things, because we've all been taught in our childhood mostly that you should stress when this happens. And not sure if it happens to you, but for me, certainly when I think about things, sometimes I think like, if I dig real deep in my subconscious, it's like, oh, my dad wouldn't want to do this that way. And that's why I need to like be stressed about like not doing it. But that's bullshit, like I should just judge for myself.
Let me tell you a story about my dad.
Yeah.
My dad's deceased. He's gone from this earth. But my dad used to start work super early in the morning, like 6 a.m. or something. And he'd be home by 11 a.m.
Wow.
But no one else in the organization he worked in was working. Well, sorry, no one else was finishing at 11 a.m. So I asked my dad, what do you do with all the meeting invites and everything that come after 11 a.m.? And he said, oh, I just mark them as not attending. I just cancel them.
Okay.
Just no second thought. No, but if it's a really important meeting,
it's like black and white thinking. Right? Yeah.
It's just, well, I'm not in office, and these are in-person meetings. So if someone wants to have a meeting with me, they can have it between 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. If they want to have it, they don't want to have a meeting with me. So, but I think there's a lot of things that happen in that scenario, but we're CEOs. If you want to say, I don't do meetings at this time or that time. I mean, that wasn't even a CEO. He was just, like a project manager in a large organization. Like he just had sort of had his rules, and like that was that. So maybe you have a sense of stress and sort of responsibility that comes from past memories, and maybe I have the opposite. Maybe like I saw what it means to just be working or not be working, and over time I realized, oh yeah, I can afford myself that same latitude.
Yeah. Yeah. I love setting rules also, like mental rules, like telling your mind, okay, I will not do that, and no negotiation. That's a cool mental concept as well.
Well, I don't like that at all, actually. I think in my view, that's actually a very caustic thing to do. I think that rules
depends. Like in some situations, it helps. Not like with your whole life, right? Like
sure.
And I don't mean like hard set rules. I mean like, let's say that you've been struggling with an addiction for the past 5 years, whether that's porn, whether that's alcohol or something. At some points, if you really want to break it, one of my favorite tools was setting rules like you can't do that, like, hey, dumb brain, you won't eat that McDonald's or that burger, you will not, and
Yeah.
that's it, and no negotiation, and end of conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, like
I used to
I
do
hate
that a
rules
lot
too,
more when
like
I was younger. I used to
okay,
do that a lot more when I was younger. I would say, this month I'm not going to eat any chocolate or something like that. But then as I get older, I sort of don't care to do those things anymore.
yeah.
I don't
Uh,
like the mental stress of the can and the can't and that kind of thing. It doesn't come from a place of calm. It comes from like a sort of a tension
yeah,
that doesn't need to exist in the first place. So I'm okay
yeah,
saying, I'll eat some chocolate when I want to eat some chocolate and I won't when I won't. I've
yeah,
had too many times
100%.
of,
But
you
you
know,
got your shit together. That's why, like with time. Well, most of your shit together. That is, um, and yeah, I think that flow is important, and same for my diet. Like I do Ironmans and shit, but I still have a pizza in it every now and then. Like why not? Life is good. Um, Especially in Brooklyn. Like whenever I hit Brooklyn pizza, I'm gonna give you a call or something.
but
Hey,
you seem like someone that you have lots of things you want to achieve and accomplish in your life. I mean, you have a lot of things going on. I actually don't have that anymore. I don't think about every time I have this sense of like, I need to, I understand that that's just sort of ego positioning. So yeah,
for
you,
me,
you,
it's
you can feel
striving.
excited and happy when,
Like I love
yeah.
doing
And,
all of these things. This it's and yes, there's an ego part of it, which is mostly subconscious from childhood, but I love touching a whole bunch of things. It makes me smarter, it makes me better. um
hmm.
and but yeah, like I understand that like some people would be like, dude, you're a jack of all trades, master of none, or you're wasting energy in all directions. But yeah, me, I love it.
No, I don't know. I don't know, wasting energy. That's not how I frame it. I think that there's, there's, I don't know. I would say I used to be more like you. I used to be more like you. And so maybe what happens is at a certain point, it comes from maturity or whatever. Not like in that sense. I mean, literally, like just existing longer on the earth. You realize that um, all the things written on your thing here, 3 times Ironman, 2 times silent retreats, 43 times founder, 5K words written per day, 15 plus sales calls per day. Like you won't find me telling anyone about my accomplishments. There's nowhere on the internet that even like says really what I've accomplished, except maybe like my LinkedIn or something. But who cares? Like when I say who cares, I mean like literally, who cares?
Yeah, it's relevant
You know?
for like speed dating. For business, it's not about like bragging, but just like show you like who I am, what's my pedigree. um Doing an Ironman is like something only people that
But
have
that's
done it and
awesome.
have done it.
Yeah, no,
It
that's
shows like
cool.
my mentality and what kind of caliber
But you
of
never asked me how
mind.
many Ironmans I did.
How many?
I've never done an
I
Ironman.
I
I've
knew
never
you
done an
didn't had to
Ironman.
tell. But yeah, no.
But think about it from like from a like a very a sort of different angle. If if my if I had a background like yours and it said box sonatas and partitas, um, you know, 220 BPM, no mistakes, uh, and like all this like random shit, you'd be like, it's like 22 hours straight piano arpeggios achieved, 6,000 chord progressions written. You'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? You know?
No, no, but
But
like
because
me,
they're
I'd
your
be
list of
impressed.
things,
And people like that
yeah, but
actually,
those are
like, like
but those aren't those actually don't make any they don't like make any sense. You know what I mean?
Well, they don't, depending on how you see it. Like if it's from a philosophical standpoint and, like marked on your grave type of things, they don't. From a business standpoint, they
Yeah.
do. Um, I've been getting like lots of good feedback, and yeah, it's up me. I'm always experimenting, so it's
Mm.
it's just good to know. And the Iron Man thing might sound cheesy, uh, obviously, and it's just the
Doesn't
beginning,
sound easy at all.
but it's you get like downloads from these things, major downloads. Same for the retreats, and it's a non-spiritual thing to do, I understand, but still, like me, I have my specific style of doing things. um and yeah, it shows that I have these chips inside of me. um and that can lead to another conversation. Oh, I did Ironman too. Oh, I'm an ultra
Mm.
runner, and so forth. And yeah, like it
Sure.
might sound like egotistic and culture driven, and by the way, it is. And I don't feel like any shame like doing that, because it's, to me, I consider myself at 0.1% or 0.001% of my capacity. And I'm not sure if I'll ever calm down. That's a good question. Like when I have kids, for example, will I settle? um me, I see it. Well, if I have like one clearer role model, would be like Elon. Never really settled, and obviously I don't want to mimic his parenting and or relationship style. But from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I don't want to settle. All of this noise. And by the way, I have a very peaceful life. I'm calm, and I'm sound minded. Although sometimes it's tough, right, with business. But I
Sure.
think it's part of it, and I think I thrive in the 8,500 meters altitude on top of Everest, and in the zone where there's like low oxygen. Me, I thrive in there.
Mhm.
I thrive in chaos. I thrive in destruction. It's like creation and destruction constantly. And
Mm.
yeah, I like it that way. But obviously, like talking about the silent retreat, for example, that was like torture, because yeah, for 10 days, I had this voice, and I would take all these notes. I could get my deep meditations, but yeah, it's like trying to I ask you what you optimize for. Well, on a daily basis, I optimize for learning, for education, for getting smarter. And a retreat optimizes for pure calm and zero noise. So it was like throwing a pinball machine into like, yeah, a no sound room. So
It's it, it it just sounds to me like, I think the it sounds like you got the Tim Ferriss disease.
yeah, that's probably 5% of my
And
disease.
I don't have it. I don't have a Tim Ferriss disease. And I think interestingly, if you want to, if you sort of go deep on Tim Ferriss or Gary Vaynerchuk or like any of these guys that are really sort of like accomplishment driven, you're what you're confronted with very quickly, and this is sort of like, understood if you just listen to anything these dudes say, is they're very open about their own mental illness that sort of drive illness. I think that's maybe a